Hey there, it's your career insider, Sindy Thomas. Welcome to Season 3 of the Insiders Career Club podcast, where industry professionals share the inside, and I've got that in air quotes, scoop on their careers. Listeners know that I'm an HR career professional who's been in TA for over 25 years. But did you also know that I coach clients and help them plan and grow their careers, manage career transitions, help refine your interviewing skills, or I can help you work on a job search strategy? Now, have you been passed over for a promotion or a raise? Maybe you're frustrated because you're interviewing but not getting the job offer. If that's happened to you, let me help you get back on track. Sign up for a free coaching call today with me at insiderscareerclub.com. Remember, it's possible for you to have a great and a fulfilling career. Let's get you the career you deserve. Now, don't go anywhere. Up next is a great podcast. Stay tuned. Hey there, insiders. It's Sindy Thomas, your career insider. And I've got a great podcast guest. Her name is Lorianne Duguay, and she's the founder and CEO of People-Powered Solutions. She helps organizations ignite organizational transformation by helping them assess and optimize their employee journey and talent management strategy. She's a strategic and innovative HR partner and helps translate your business vision into HR initiatives that improve your company's performance, profitability, growth, and employee engagement. Lorianne is a certified Dispute Resolution Practitioner with an advanced certificate in alternative dispute resolution from the Canadian Institute of Applied Negotiation. Her educational background includes a postgraduate certificate in HR Management and Labor Relations from Athabasca University and a BA in Humanities from Laurentian University. Let's welcome her into the show. Lori, welcome into the Insiders Career Club podcast. I'm so pleased to be able to speak with you today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Okay, I'm actually in Northern Ontario, Canada, and a little community called Moonbeam. And yes, you heard that right. It's literally Moonbeam, M-O-N-B-E-M. I often get people ask me, how do you spell that? Exactly as it sounds. Moon as in what's in the sky at night, and beam as the beams of light that come off from it. Anyway, so I've grown up here my entire life up in Northern Ontario and went away to go to school, came back here, started working for government and kept working for 21 years until making my permanent departure from government 2 years ago. So yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And where did you go away to school? Did you come to the U.S. or did you stay in Canada?
I stayed in Canada. I went to Ottawa initially, and then I completed the remainder of my studies out of Sudbury. So Ottawa being the capital of Canada. I was at Carleton University there and then continued through Laurentian University, which is located in Sudbury, which is in Northern Ontario.
Okay. So what made you choose HR as your career focus?
Actually, I've always been very passionate about teams and about helping organizations leverage their teams to achieve their organizational objectives, right? And I feel that properly managing your people will actually get you there. But too many organizations fail to do that effectively. So I was always very intrigued by employee engagement. I find that generally HR folk fall into two buckets. Either those that are really passionate about the more operational type HR, talking payroll, policies, procedures, and then the more strategic HR lovers. So everything having to do with, just developing an overarching strategy to better engage, to help your teams manage and navigate through change, and just training, talent development. And where do you find that talent to be able to achieve your organizational objectives? Personally, I've always been extremely passionate about the latter bucket. So that organization.
Yeah, that's where I am as an HR person. It's like, how can we make this better? What can we do? We want people to be involved, and be active. What are we going to do about it? Do you find, or do you think that the old way of doing business, of being separate away from your people and not really engaging with them really well, aligns with those people that kind of don't get into the strategy piece of it?
I would say that we perhaps find more of those who adhere to that old way of doing stuff, moving away from before folks would finally recognize and the value of having HR as a business partner, as opposed to just working, in their own silo out of sight. I think they tend to gravitate to the more operational camps. Absolutely. But whether or not, I think we need to work hard at somehow eliminating that mindset in both camps. We really want to start to strive towards understanding how the people responsible for not only bringing in folks to your organization, but keeping them engaged and keeping them paid, ultimately scheduling them, right? Everything, we want to stay to that operational side of things, and providing the codes of conduct to be able to operate within this organization. They are strategic partners in and of themselves, right? So many organizations see them just as a more administrative role. And we need to help them shift that mindset to recognize them for the business partners that they are.
Right, right. I know that HR, and I used to come up against it a lot in larger organizations where HR was just feared and hated. And then when I started working for smaller companies, you really felt like you were able to partner more because you had more direct contact with executive level management. You were able to be more engaged with them. And that thinking comes from the top down. Then their managers, their directors, their VPs want to be more involved and are open to partnerships with HR.
Do you think that's actually because they need to be more of a partner with HR because they recognize, in spite of the size of their organization being maybe small or medium enterprise, they just don't have the people in place to be able to divide and conquer. They really need this to be a strategic partnership. So it's a bit more pressing due to the very construct of that organization size, right?
In the companies that I worked in for the last 13 years, the CEOs that I worked with were very savvy. They were just as involved on the people side of the business as they were on the business side of the business. They wanted to build good, strong organizations that would bring out the best in their employees. Now, I worked in the biotech, biopharma, and pharmaceutical industries for the last 13 years. And in those particular industries, you are so depending on the success of your employees to propel your company forward. And so it's important that you keep the brain trust there because it takes R&D a number of years to bring a new drug or test into fruition. And you want to keep your people to maintain continuity. It was important for the CEOs to ensure that the employees wanted to stay and to create a good company culture. It was also key that they were aligned with the company mission so that employees were inspired to find the solution to that disease. I enjoyed working in these companies because it was an added mission to your work. We were all working for the common good. And although we were making money, or we were going to make money, there was a very big focus on working for the common good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
Okay, let's get back to you because I feel like I talked too much about me in that little segment there. How did you end up actually becoming an HR strategist and workplace culture analyst?
Through my experience with government, I'll be quite frank, I ended up becoming what I refer to as a tenant of the workplace. So basically, if we want to liken this to a very recent trending term, quiet quitter, I was a tenant of the workplace. I was there occupying space, really doing what was, minimally required of my position and job description, but not much else because I felt otherwise completely disengaged. So through my roles within government, I worked in a variety of strategic HR roles and was really able to start to measure employee engagement, start to really gauge where we're doing really well and where there was room for improvement, and then develop initiatives and working groups to proactively try to mitigate some of the challenges that had come up through the various needs assessment exercises. And then I really started to fall more and more in love with that piece right there.
Mm-hmm.
And really government, whether we recognize it or not, we're working at the, control of the political party in power at the time. Every 4 years, when there's a new election, a new party elected, we're seeing, new programs coming out that we need to administer. We're seeing things being canceled. So that being said, there's a lot of levels of approval linked to just getting some initiatives up and running. That's where I started to realize that a lot of those levels of approval, I'm convinced, to have been put in place to essentially stagnate innovation and to stagnate, forward momentum relevant to anything having to do with organizational excellence and building a work environment that's better and more engaging for your staff. So I already knew I was very passionate about that with my work with government, with a variety of different departments that I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
But later in life, when I started to re-examine my career and realizing that I'd become a tenant and knowing that I had pretty much resolved not to retire from government, I looked into my working into my postgraduate studies to be able to acquire my HR management labor relations certificate, got that under wraps and started doing consulting on the side and started helping the more the smaller mom and pop shops, as you referenced earlier, the medium to small to medium enterprise, and helping them build those work environments and realizing how engaged they are when at actually implementing some of the recommendations that I'd put out there, and at building, we could build a framework and actually roll it out, and it actually was successful. Where in government, we would build these frameworks and then they'd end up stuck in the hierarchy of approvals and never actually going anywhere until the next government switch over and then being kiboshed because it wasn't built during the government, the day. Mm-hmm. So I decided about 2 years ago to try this out full time. And because the demand is out there, right? It's a job seekers market. Right. 1 in 4 employees are currently shopping. Even if they're working for you, they're already shopping. They've got a foot out the door. So at helping these smaller organizations address a lot of their recruitment challenges and their retention challenges by creating and crafting that really ideal work environment that's highly motivating for everyone working there, but also that people are talking about and you become that highly sought after employer, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how I got to doing the culture catalyst. And I use catalyst as my defining word, because I shake stuff up. I come in there, I look at the culture, I meet them where they're at, I figure out what are we going really well, and how could we shake the snow globe, shake this culture up a bit so that when it lands, it's actually providing the results from a retention perspective as well as a recruitment perspective. It's enabling you to attract and keep the talent that you need to be able to thrive.
Great. Now, when you're going in and shaking things up, how are you arriving at the type of culture that is going to get people involved and make them want to
thrive instead of just occupy space? Exactly. It's actually quite simple. And I think that everyone knows that we can't motivate a person directly, but what you can do is create a motivating work environment. And there's 10 motivational drivers that I work from. And I basically, how I come in and we map out the existing employee experience. What does your current employee experience look like? From the moment you're pitching yourself at the interview to them through to the moment they're exiting your organization, right? So what does that experience look and feel like right now? And then I talk about those 10 motivational drivers, clarity of role, clarity of expectations. How are you providing that clarity at the interview process? How are you providing that clarity throughout the entire onboarding and orientation period? How are you providing that clarity and reiterating it via the performance development process, right? So we're reworking some of these key talent development exercises or processes to ensure that they're providing those 10 motivational drivers. All of those different key touch points throughout an employee experience have been tweaked and optimized to ensure that they're providing a highly engaging, highly motivating experience to the employees. And, by that very nature, they end up increasing the retention and their engagement levels.
Okay. All right. What are you seeing in the workplace environment that needs to be redesigned?
Start from the top down, right? So leadership. I think that there's still a lot of leaders out there, a lot of organizations that have leaders who are not necessarily trained and adept at embracing and taking on the leadership approach that resonates with the demographics that are currently within their organization. So when you think about the age of the workers and just the different generations in the workplace, the former or more traditional command and control approach, do this because I say so, is just not resonating. It's not landing with them. So I think there's definitely the first gap, if you will, is a need to train folks on and leaders within the organization at every level on how to coach and empower your employees and how to take that approach of leadership as opposed to the command and control. So definitely, if we're going top down, we know that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses typically. So that being said, we need to make sure that we're providing our leaders with our existing leaders, as well as our aspiring leaders with the training tools and resources they need to be able to adopt that coach and empower approach to leadership. Second thing, that just the evolving workplace and just how the pandemic only amplified or accelerated something that was already well in motion of, people seeking to strike that work-life balance. So how do you accommodate that? How do you actually tweak your existing policies, procedures to accommodate work-life balance, to provide flexible working arrangements, to provide hybrid, workplaces? And what does that look like? And how do you do that well? And even from that hybrid workplace perspective, how do you actually continue to engage from a distance? That it be authentic, that it not just be, we have a weekly coffee time where everybody hops on virtually and there's some crazy levels of awkwardness, but at least we're doing our due diligence and we're actually trying, right? It's being done as a checkmark exercise instead of it being done as a strategic exercise to really ensure you're providing that level of motivation, despite the fact that they're not physically in the office with you. So we're certainly seeing workplaces trying to figure out what's the secret sauce when it comes to those hybrid workplaces and how do you continue to engage virtually and how do you strike that balance between work and life? How do you help them strike that balance all the while still getting work done and being operationally kind of efficient and effective? So it's certainly that is a challenge that we're seeing. And I think that's worldwide, really post-pandemic. And even I think if we go to the hybrid for the teleworking, I think there needs to also be a shift as much as it provided a level of normalcy, the dog coming in, people taking calls in a t-shirt instead of a suit. I think we need to kind of have that pendulum swing back towards the middle a bit where there's some level of etiquette relevant to it's okay if you want to work from home, but you need to make sure that you've got a dedicated workspace. Now that the kids are back in school, you need to make sure that you minimize disruptions, that you actually have some core business hours that you're working within, or if you want to add that flexible piece, that we have some very specific kind of performance standards that we expect that you fulfill within, say, the total week, right? So just to start to standardize some of those working arrangements to make sure that they're beneficial to the individual, but also to the organization.
Right. And, it's very hard if you don't have some of that. I know that some of the organizations that I worked with, you could come in and there was a flexible, so many hours in the day. Some of us, like me, I like to start at 7:00 in the morning, not everybody's that crazy, but, a lot of the people that were working, the scientists that were working in the lab or the technicians, they were in early. But other people, the regular folks in marketing and sales, they come in around 9. But there were core business hours that you were required to be there. And, that just makes it easier for everyone to find you during the day, whether it's for a meeting that you're running to down the hall or one that you're logging into on Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is. So yeah, that's key. And there also has to be some rules of etiquette, conduct or an etiquette on how you're, what you do on a call. You're not sitting there eating, fiddling with some game on your desktop or whatever, but you're truly engaged. And there needs to be some parameters set around that.
I think so. I think it's the only way we'll kind of settle into a new norm that just as efficient. To your point about, that etiquette also, I would even say on the employer side, there needs to be some etiquette where during the pandemic, it was back-to-back calls, right? You're hopping from one Zoom call to the next because there's the beauty of having that transition time and not having to commute from one meeting to the next, whether within the same building or between different buildings. that's okay that we've lost that transition time. But I think employers need to recognize that that transition time also was really important in terms of just mindset and nurturing that kind of reset before that next meeting and digest maybe something that was said in the previous meeting, right? So there needs to be an adaptation of sorts where we're actually obligating our employees, our team members to work in those 15-minute transitions between meetings, to carve that time out so that they're able to ensure they're tending to their mental health and they're just setting themselves up for success, right? Moving from one meeting to the next, because I don't think it's healthy for us to be back-to-back calls.
No,
where we're literally clicking one button to leave meeting and clicking join, right? That's just not.
And the stress of it all, because meetings don't always end exactly on the hour. They may go a few minutes over. And if you're in something and let's say you're with your manager, you don't want to click out early, but you're going to be late to the next meeting. It could be a team member, whatever it is, but it gives you a certain level of stress, right? Like I need to be over here, but I'm still stuck in this meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the well-known bio breaks that you need to take, or maybe you need to grab a cup of coffee and you don't want to be leaving the meeting and missing something.
Yeah, exactly. My thoughts exactly on the scene that I literally actually did what I said that we shouldn't do for this recording. I clicked off leave meeting and join this recording because my meeting did run like a couple minutes late. Oh,
yeah, it does. And sometimes you can set that up ahead of time so people are expecting it. I'm very happy to be here. Let's get some work done. I may have to leave early if we run over, because I have back-to-backs today or next meeting, whatever. And then people don't feel slighted. But there's so much to kind of revamp in your mind and your habits and dealing with some of this working from home, being remote, that you don't always think about. Yeah. Let's talk about pivoting the mindset of leaders from wherever it is now to a people-centric approach. Can you talk about that?
Organizations spend so much time building and fostering and nurturing that client relationship. They don't spend enough time nurturing and fostering the relationships with their greatest asset, their own people. They need to understand that the things that make me tick might be quite different than the things that make you tick. And they need to spend some time understanding what are the needs and preferences of each one of their employees, and then attempting to structure their workplace to accommodate or to meet them where they're at to some extent, obviously all within operational needs. But I think their leaders need to understand that there are a variety of styles and personality styles on their teams. And you need to make sure that you're projecting the style of leadership that will actually motivate and engage each one of those styles. I'm a huge fan and a licensed partner of Everything Disc. I don't know if you're familiar with Wiley's Everything Disc assessment tools.
No.
Okay. So really powerful, game-changing assessment tools. And I use them with a lot of my clients. And when you think about all these personality assessments, be it Myers-Briggs, be it Strengths Finders, they tend to lump you into the different styles on a team into 4 buckets. Same thing with Everything Disc. They use the DISC, so dominant, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness are the 4 prominent styles. But in all my work I've done with teams, with organizations, there's always a mix of all 4 styles on the team. So if managers at the very least can start to understand what are some of those 4 styles, preferences, and needs, and then are able to adapt. So a perfect example, the influencer style of manager, for example, will be very, they're like the cheerleaders, extremely optimistic. They're big thinkers. They think outside the box. They're the creatives of all the styles. They strive for action. They strive for results. So they tend to be very, very fast paced. Well, if that manager is taking that approach with their other style, the C styles, for example, the conscientiousness, who are the polar opposite of that style and tend to require time to analyze, they like to digest, they need information to be presented sequentially and logically, right? If you've got the manager who's projecting his own style, which is normal, right? We tend to project how we're wired to project to this other individual on their team. Well, they're actually actively demotivating that person. They're contributing to the disengagement of that employee. So it's really important for us to understand the value of starting with our people, being people-centric and working our way back and really adapting our approach and our style of leadership to ensure that it's engaging a variety of styles within our team, because there is a mix and variety within each team. Does that make
And
sense?
it's very valuable. I mean, there's so much value in diversity. And I know, diversity gets used a lot, and people are thinking from a cultural perspective, but just diversity in the way that people think and work.
No, and it breeds innovation. It's so, when we hear the saying, I don't know if I'm French. My first language is French, so it might not be an English saying, but two heads are better than one. Have you ever heard that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does it assume you think that both heads are thinking the same? No, it recognizes the value of diversity and perspective. These two heads are coming at it at a different angle, which means we're going to have a solution. If we're troubleshooting a problem, for example, we're actually going to have a solution that is really comprehensive because we've considered more than one perspective.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And I know that as a leader of a team, I had people working underneath me. I was the head of talent acquisition. When I looked to bring people on board my team, I did what I was purporting to the clients, in-house clients that I was working with. I looked to balance it out. I looked for strengths here in this particular area. This person brings this to the table. This person brings something else, because you want to have a team that can handle it all and comes at it from different ways. And so, yes, that's the right way to build your team. Unfortunately, sometimes you inherit a team. That way, when that happens, you're going to have to adjust your style, right? Like you were saying.
Exactly. And I love how you alluded to that importance of mapping out your team and understanding what are our strengths, what are maybe areas that we don't necessarily have the skills or competency within our existing members that we can leverage. So really, these are the things that as we're prepping our next recruitment or selection process, we need to make sure that we're asking questions that are going to enable us to measure those specific competencies, because that's what we need to bring in. The 4 styles is, again, something it's everything DISC tools really provide us the option to map out that team, right? Because you understand you've got some D's, you get some I's, you got some C's. Oh, wow, I don't have a lot of F's on my team. So when you think about the different styles, you need these C's, for example, the conscientiousness, which are great planners. They're going to give you a step-by-step how-to. You need the I's to get the big ideas, those big visions, so that we're able to determine where are we building our plan. Okay, here's the vision. Yeah, we need that to happen. Okay, then you've got the C's that they'll help you build the plan. Your S's, your steadiness, are actually, I call them my little maternal relationship keepers. They're very nurturing. They're great at ensuring that everybody has a voice. Everybody's had their say. So you want them on your team, while your dominants are those who are just going to kick us in the butt and get us moving and actually get us progressing so that we're not stuck in this eternal planning phase. So you really need a mixture of all 4, any team. So once you've actually mapped out your team and you have an understanding of what are some of the styles that we have a lot of, where is there actual need to recruit more of, right? Which styles? It's really... And regardless of the tool you use, I think it's important, if you're taking you should be taking a people-centric approach, to map out what your team looks like. You do a bit of an inventory, right? A skills inventory. What do we have a lot of, and what could we use more of?
For the last number of years, probably since the pandemic, LinkedIn has been purporting that employers consider switching to a hiring focus that is more skills-based, meaning you are hiring individuals for their skills and experience versus hiring someone that has a 4-year degree, skills and experience. So my question is, have you seen a change in the way people are hiring?
Absolutely. I think that's happening everywhere. I think it's more about suitability to learn, openness to learn, openness to assimilate, right? You don't necessarily have to have 5 years experience, because really all I need to know is that you're open to learning, and I'll build up the training program to make sure that we're able to transmit the information and the skill that you need and bring you up to the level we need you to be able to operate on an ongoing basis. So I 100% agree with that approach to hiring and understanding the value of you can have 10 years of education and 10 years of experience, but if you've got bad experience, if you've got a bad attitude, or if you spent 10 years of that experience doing one single thing.
Exactly. The same
how much more confident are you, right? So you're no further ahead. It's really important to hire for suitability and for openness to learn and to grow. That's what I target.
We're still going through the Great Resignation. It's been happening for over a year. What would you say are some of the elements that have been missing in the employee's experience that businesses can do to tweak and improve their employee experience?
I love that question. I'm often asked by employers, when I'm working with an organization, my clients, the first thing they say are, okay, you got 10 drivers. Which 2 should I focus on right now? My opinion, you should focus on all of them. But I'll tell you, every time I've done some employee engagement exercise with an organization, the top 3 complaints or top 2 complaints, if you will, number 1 is communication, lack thereof, basically. Not feeling like you're being put in the dark, you're left in the dark, that there's things happening that you're not privy to, and that somehow you feel like they're trying to hide something from you. So certainly the importance of not only communicating top down and providing those updates, those org-wide updates, and letting them know what are some of the challenges we're contending with, what are some of the stuff we're working on now, what's our future direction, what's that going to look like, right? But also creating the channels to facilitate communication to flow 360. So to flow bottom up as well. Do you have in place some mechanisms or some channels for employees to provide their feedback to senior leadership, to provide their contributions and their intel relevant to some of the initiatives that are being rolled out or maybe even designed, so they're able to be part of the solution, right? What are some of the systems that you have in place to be able to facilitate that? Be it, some focus groups, some working groups where you're rolling out some surveys, and then you're compiling and analyzing some of this feedback and actually actioning it, right? One of the places that so many organizations fall short is that they gather all this data, they'll communicate the results, but they won't actually make a plan to improve on it. There's that follow through that needs to happen after, and the communication needs to continue to be consistent throughout that follow through phase. So certainly communication and peer-to-peer communication as well. So being able to make sure that I can communicate with those I'm relying on to work, but also with other departments or other divisions that are stakeholders in the work that I do on a daily basis. So communication, number 1. Number 2, I would say leadership. And we've already covered that one of making sure that your leaders are provided with the training to support and to coach and empower their team members. And the last one, room to grow. So many people leave organizations because it's not part of any growth plan, not part of any career path, that where they're at today is basically where they'll likely be by retirement. So it's really important, again, to communicate what are the different career trajectories throughout this organization and work with the employees at identifying some growth goals and then helping them map out an action plan, a realistic action plan to start to build skills and competency to one day be ready to step into that and ascend to that other role. So those are the three top complaints that I hear. So if I have to give some advice on, what could they do now, is definitely to examine how they're communicating, to spend some time thinking about the training they're providing their leadership, and see how they could improve on that and provide it more consistently, groom that next succession as well, and make sure that they're identifying, they have systems in place to identify the succession to leadership, and that they're providing those emerging leaders with training earlier than later. Because if someone has that high potential, that, the 3% of your workforce who are, I define high potential as smart, hungry, and humble. If you are a hypo and you're not being provided with those curated developmental opportunities early on in your career with an organization, then you're going to be poached by someone else. Someone else will see you for what you've got to offer, and they'll make sure they do provide that curated developmental plan.
I do want to make a comment about the communication piece, because a lot of organizations will work on communication, but the environment that you are working in, whether it's your team, your manager, and just the company in general, the environment is not open so that people, they may have lots of ideas and feedback for their leadership, and it may not always be complimentary, but they're afraid to speak their mind because they are afraid they're going to be disciplined or penalized for it. So you have to create an environment in which people feel free to share their opinions and ideas and not get penalized for it. And you will get some of those jewels that will really make your organization better.
I've got clients that we're not even conducting exit interviews. And I tell them that's a lot of unmined gold when it comes to people actually speaking their truth, because at that point they're out the door. So they will be quite frank in terms of what their work environment was like and where was there room to improvement and what might have made them consider staying, right?
Okay, I think you may get more frank discussion at that point, but I do think that people are also very cautious about not burning their references.
Well, you know what I do? I recommend they do multiple channeled. So an anonymous survey that's sent out, a survey link where they're able to maintain their anonymity, call from HR and or, someone else in the organization than their own supervisor. Because I've seen clients who have the supervisor do the exit interview. Well, if my issue and the reason I'm leaving is you. I'm very honest in that interview. So let's make sure we neutralize that process and the mechanism that you're providing them, the channel you're providing them to give their feedback, and do it in as many formats as you feel will have offered a real inclusive opportunity to provide the feedback.
Great advice. Great advice. How can employers measure their current level of employee engagement?
I always start with ENPS. So you've heard of a customer net promoter score, client net promoter score. There's actually an employee net promoter score. It's a 1-question survey you send out. How likely are you to recommend this place of employment to friends and loved ones? Period. You have to add the caveat that, not that we're saying that if you don't like them, you tell them to work here because it's horrendous, right? You really have to kind of frame that question. But basically you're trying to say, is this a place that you would tell others, come on, you need to apply here. It's so amazing, right? And so on a scale of 1 to 10, and if you Google employee net promoter score, you're actually going to say, you're going to find the formula used. It's a scale of 1 to 10 and based on their rating, it'll actually provide you a net promoter score. The first time you do that exercise, it'll tell you what your net promoter, those who are telling people you need to apply here, what's the score on the sum of everyone who's responded. And then you're able to do a deeper dive. I always encourage to add under that 1 question, please elaborate why you rated it so. Not everyone's going to fill it out, but a lot of people will. It's a 1-question survey. Everyone can handle a 1-question survey. And if I just have to say a few lines on why I rated it a 6, for example, poor leadership, lack of communication, right? Then I've got some information, some data. If you take that data and then you marry it with, the exit interview data that you've compiled today, you're able to build a really robust employee engagement survey. So that's that next level. Then you send out that deeper dive employee engagement survey, which is ultimately aimed at measuring the degree to which you're providing those 10 motivational drivers and using some of the red flags that may have been identified during the exit interviews and or through the additional please provide the rating reason of the employee net promoter score. And you're able to really build a survey that's going to provide you with the data you need to then develop and implement a really sound employee engagement strategy.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about this quiet quitting phenomenon that seems to be the subject of quite a few articles I get on a weekly basis. What is it, and how can managers support their quietly quitting employees to help them transform into thriving employees?
Okay. What is quiet quitting? When we speak about quiet quitting, it's actually not a new phenomenon. What it is, and I'm sure you'll agree as an HR person, someone who's worked in HR, it's a new term for something we've known has plagued organizations for years now. Employee disengagement, this notion of employees becoming a tenant, as I talked about earlier, of the workplace, not accepting any extracurricular projects, barely interacting with their colleagues, really coming in, doing their shift. If you hear things like, I'm just here to do my shift till I go home, right? That's not a good sign. That's a sign that you've got some disengagement. And you
may not be doing that well, right?
No, you're not. Those are some of the red flag comments that I allude to in a lot of my my articles. It's really about, you know what? You need to figure out why they've become tenants, and likely through an engagement survey, as we just suggested, you'll recognize that you're not necessarily offering the employee experience that you might be pitching at the interview. So in the dating world, I believe some of these apps, they call it catfishing. It's a phenomenon where, you put this picture up and you make yourself into this amazing person and then it's actually, when they meet you in person, it's a picture from, 20 years ago. You don't look anything like that. Well, employers need to make sure that they're not just catfishing their prospective talent. If you're, at the interview, for example, showing a video of all the cool projects they'll get to work on and what kind of a culture you guys offer employees, once they actually come in, you got to make sure you're delivering on that promise, right? You got to make sure that you're reworking every step of that employee journey, and that you're especially spending time with the existing employees who may be fully trained, but they're not done, right? You need to make sure that you're to curate and to provide them with developmental opportunities, with training, so that they feel invested in and they feel seen and they feel heard and valued, so that they're not shifting into that one group that I reference as shoppers. You don't want them stepping into the shopping mode, because once they step into the shopping mode, it's really difficult to bring them back into that highly engaged, fully thriving employee mode.
They have disengaged at that point, because it took a lot to get them to shopping mode. It really did.
Absolutely. And it took a series of disappointments to get them to that checked out mode, right? For sure.
All right.
So that's essentially, when we hear quiet quitting, it's a new term for employee disengagement. And the way to actually address it is to spend some time mapping out your current experience, figuring out how are people feeling about the experience we're currently offering and where's there room for improvement, but then actually developing a plan and implementing some strategies to be able to improve on that employee experience, to assure you're providing the motivational drivers that make people not only show up and occupy space, but actually make them invested in the broader organizational purpose and make them want to be a part of the work that you're here doing and make them want to thrive while doing so.
Thank you so much, Lori. Very inspiring, very informational. It's been my pleasure to speak with you.
It's absolutely been my pleasure to speak with you as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and imparting your wisdom. I mean, I think we covered a lot of different things, and as it pertains to leadership, as it pertains to employees, as it pertains to, making the workplace a better environment. And I hope that people will be able to walk away with some of these pearls of wisdom that you shared with us.
Well, I'm glad to have had the opportunity to.
Thank you for sharing everything that you shared with us, and wish you continued success.
Same to you.
Thanks for listening, and your support's a blessing. If you enjoyed the podcast, give us a positive rating on Apple. It will help our podcast ranking on all the major sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. We release new podcasts every 2 weeks on the first and third Wednesdays. Now your support is needed. Keep listening and share these career-changing podcasts with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and anyone else you feel it will bless. In addition to the major sites, they can also find these podcasts on my website at insiderscareerclub.com. Now, if you're not happy with your career, let me help you. I can help you get your career on track. Sign up for a free coaching call with me today. Before you go, let's speak victory over you. You have a bright future. Good breaks are looking for you, and new doors are about to swing wide open with opportunity. Believe it. Until next time, take care.